What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Here, guys, Derek and Cody with you as always. And guys, the number one pick has officially been traded, and it's not to the Indianapolis Colts. It is actually to the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers ended up giving Chicago the number 9 pick, their second rounder this year, their first rounder next year, and their second rounder next year, and gave up their last really good wide receiver that they had in DJ Moore in order to move up to number 1 to get to the number 1 pick. Now, Cody, we've been waiting to see if Ballard was going to make this move. Obviously, he didn't. Carolina went ahead and went all in on their chips to get some kind of person. How do you feel about not getting the number 1 pick here?
Well, for what Carolina gave up, I know they were down. They were number 9 before this trade, so they had to give up a little bit, probably more than like the Colts would have had to give up. But gosh, like I think for this, I guess it tells me this. It tells me the Colts, and looking at all these different quarterbacks that they've scouted and they've looked at and they broke down and they've met with and all this stuff. It tells me that there's not one quarterback that they feel like is the cream of the crop, if you will, right? There's not a quarterback that's like a Trevor Lawrence a couple years ago or an Andrew Luck or whoever it is, that's a clear-cut number 1 pick. And I also look at it like this, like you got your top 2 quarterbacks, but it tells me the Colts are more comfortable with more than 2 guys. Like they're comfortable with probably 3 or 4 guys. So you factor in, okay, who could that be? It could be Richardson. It could be Stroud. It could be Young. It could be any of these guys. I think it almost guarantees. And again, I know we'll talk about the number 3 pick, what happens there. But if Arizona stays there, you're pretty much guaranteed to get one of those top 3 guys there in the draft. And so for me, it just tells me that the Colts are very comfortable with that. And also they're not willing to mortgage their future, because if you suck next year and that quarterback's terrible, say it's Anthony Richardson and he's terrible in year 1, like you're going to probably get another top 10 pick. Like that's what it tells me. So yeah, overall, I understood why the Colts didn't do that for the price that it was. Like you said, it was a second round pick.
You basically got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a big wide receiver for it.
And a really good wide receiver who's better than anybody the Colts currently have. So you think about, gosh, what would the Colts had to give up, in order to get him? And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm okay with it. It obviously sucks that Carolina, quarterback desperate team. We kind of thought they might be a team that was in trading for that, but seems like they have their conviction on some guy, whether it's Stroud, whether it's Young, whether it's Richardson, who knows? I feel like it could be any of those guys. I've heard different, I think, leanings and different people who say, oh, they're probably going to pick this guy. They're probably going to pick that guy.
Yeah.
I would think that Bryce Young would be, one of the 2 guys taken in the first 2 picks from what I've heard and what Nate Atkins, talked about yesterday. He said, Carolina doesn't love him and they don't take him, Houston certainly will. So
yeah,
I do feel like it's like the Colts are going to have their pick of, depending what Carolina does, Richardson or CJ Stroud. But obviously the 3rd pick still sits there and it still looms and you don't know what's going to happen there. So do the Colts potentially look to trade up with Arizona just to guarantee they get one of those top 3 guys? Heck, it could be more than 3 guys. It could be 4 guys. You could throw Will Levis on there as well. Maybe the Colts feel good about him. I don't know exactly, but yeah, it certainly was definitely a trade that shook up a lot of people and kind of just came out of nowhere. We're like, you just don't know. Like it could have been another month till this news broke. But yeah, Carolina, good for them. They did what it took if they fell in love with the quarterback. But to me, it tells me the Colts weren't sold on any of these guys necessarily being the best quarterback from this class.
Yeah, I mean, again, I put out a tweet last night saying that whatever quarterback the Colts end up going with here, I am going to sit back and I'm going to accept that that's who they were trying to get, or whoever they get. I'm going to have confidence in what this group has with them going forward. I have to do that because I feel like I would be not doing my due diligence as a fan if I did not think that that's how they wanted to go about their business. And like you said, clearly, if they believed there was one guy that stood out from all the others, clearly stood out, then the Colts are in the absolute prime position to do so. And obviously they didn't do that. So clearly they did not believe that there was one guy that stood on a pedestal over everyone else. So it kind of makes you feel a little better about their feelings about it. Now, we'll say this, Cody. I don't know if you saw it last night. There's rumors going around inside the Carolina building that Carolina is actually willing to trade the number 1 pick. So here's what's going on. So they stated that if Carolina falls in love with more than one of these guys, they're looking to trade for any of these quarterbacks for a pick that allows them to move back again. And if this is true, Cody, if it is, then this would put the Colts in prime position to do so. And it would mean that there's only a few teams that would ever even be considered if that's actually the case. Because if Carolina wants to trade and get any of these quarterbacks, there's no shot that they are trading all the way back to where they just were just to get that compensation. They're going to stay within that top 4 to go and get somebody, because we've heard Seattle may potentially be willing to throw in their first 2 rounders to go and be able to get one of these quarterbacks. We know the Raiders want to try to trade up. We've heard the Falcons may want to trade up. We've heard these other teams wanting to still trade up with that number 3 team, Arizona, that's still in there. And if there's a team that's willing to give them compensation back for them to still get one of the quarterbacks that they like, but still get that compensation back a little bit, what do you think of the Indianapolis Colts doing that then? They would have a little bit more leverage, so they probably wouldn't have to forfeit as many picks later on down the road as what Carolina just had to do to trade up.
I guess I'm trying to understand, like, what is Carolina's end game here, because they're still losing some picks, like they're not going to get what they gave up.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know they're going to be higher up. I don't know. It just kind of seems crazy that they did that and now are, potentially opening themselves up to trade back again. That's just really kind of bizarre. I've never seen something like that where a team trades up and then trades back again. But yeah, I mean, certainly it wouldn't cost as much. I mean, I think that was kind of like the compensation where we're just like, absolutely not. Like, I know you maybe were a little bit more open to it. I was not really as open to trading all that draft capital next year. And so if it involves a future first round pick, I have a hard time doing that, but maybe you throw in a couple earlier picks, this year and next year, maybe that convinces Carolina, because, it is a jump, but it's not like, like you said, going from 9 to 1. Like, it's not that kind of jump. And so that is definitely interesting. But, in the event that Carolina stays at 1, I think this is kind of where I land. And I tweeted this out also earlier today. I think at some point, Derek, you have to just trust the guy that you brought in and you sat through hours and hours, basically days and days of interviews with this guy. You have to trust that whichever quarterback he tells you like he wants, he's going to be able to develop them. He's going to be able to do this based off of his body of work. I think you just give him traits and you give him like things. And that's why I think Anthony Richardson is so appealing. Like, if you got like Raheem Morris, for example, maybe then the need to trade up to 1 is a little bit more. But I feel like with the Steichen's record with working with the last 2 young quarterbacks, I know Herbert was a little bit more of a given, but especially with Jalen Hurts, you look at that and you're like, Hurts wasn't a top 5 pick. He was a 2nd round pick. So you just give him traits and you let him work on the guy. He's not going to be perfect year 1, but we saw the transformation from Jalen Hurts from his rookie year to his 2nd year. And so you trust that the guy that you brought in is going to be able to develop him. Him and Jim Bob Cooter are going to be able to develop this quarterback and get him to the spot where he needs to get, right? Now, they've talked about some of their pillars of a quarterback. One of them is accuracy. That's not really a thing that right now you would say is, one of the pillars for Anthony Richardson. But is it something where the Colts feel like, hey, if we get a few mechanics right in Richardson, he's going to be just fine? Do they feel like it's something where, he's not set in his ways, right? Because when I hear mechanics, like a lot of Colts fans think Carson Wentz, when he was stuck in his poor mechanics for years and years, he reverted back to those things and just made some boneheaded plays, right? But I think with Richardson, he's 20 years old. So he is very young, very moldable, and he's got the physical tools. Heck, he just broke all those combine records, right?
Yeah.
But
He's literally
it's
the
kind of
most
like,
athletic quarterback that's
yeah.
ever come out of the combine.
And so for me, it's like, it's not that Richardson is a run first quarterback. While he still can do that, it's like Steichen's going to, I think, teach him and maybe utilize him in ways the Eagles used Jalen Hurts the last couple of years, where
Yeah.
he does have some design quarterback runs. He is a multi-threat quarterback, but he can also throw from the pocket, and he can do things that you have to do to be successful at this level. And so for me, I just look at Steichen as like one of the brightest young minds in the NFL when it comes to working with quarterbacks. And I'm like, just give him a mold of clay, a very talented mold of clay, right? Whether that's Stroud, whether that's Richardson. Stroud, obviously a little bit more refined, Richardson a little bit more raw. But you give him a couple of years to work with this guy. And, and from what I've heard, Richardson's a guy, he has high character. He's a great kid. He's got the physical tools. He's just very raw right now. And so, that's kind of, I think, the thing I wonder about. And I think maybe fans have wondered about is like, is Richardson just super talented, but is he lazy in any way? It does not seem like that is the case here.
Yeah.
It seems like this kid has a good head on his shoulders. He knows what he needs to do to get better. And obviously he's got the physical tools to boot. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I'm perfectly content, Derek, as long as another team that needs a quarterback doesn't trade up to 3 and you're stuck with Will Levis or something like that. Like, I'm good with really Stroud or Richardson because I think they both possess things that franchise quarterbacks are. They got the size and they got the athleticism. And I really think that's what you need to be successful. So we'll see if the Colts do trade up or with Carolina or if they trade up with Arizona, which I think would cost obviously a lot less. Maybe it'd be a day 2 pick or something like that, which I'd be fine with, honestly, in the long, scheme of things. If you move up 1 and you don't really give up that a whole lot, but you secure one of those top 3 quarterbacks, I personally am fine with that. I really am, because I really don't see a scenario where Bryce Young falls to 3 or 4. I really don't.
Yeah, and I know the argument has been that the Indianapolis Colts are just not sold on Will Levis. I just want to make the point here for real quick, guys.
Sure.
If somehow, some way, the Indianapolis Colts look at Will Levis and deem that they are comfortable with him and think that Shane Steichen can do wonders with trying to work on. My issue with Levis is I don't think his mechanics are the issue. I think what the issue is with Levis is sometimes he trusts his arm too much to figure things out. And that's where I think people are misjudging Levis and Richardson. What differs between the two? They're both inaccurate at times. What makes the difference? I think that Richardson's decision making is better. I just think his mechanics are very raw, and that's something you can teach. It's a lot harder to train a guy to get better at decision making. That is much harder. It takes a few more years to get that down. But obviously, if Levis is built in and he is all in and he is willing to do everything that Shane Steichen asks him to do, then I'm going to sit here and I'll tell everyone I feel comfortable with it. I know that the majority of Colts fans will not agree or like the fact that I'm saying that, but that is how I feel. If the Colts deem it that it is best case scenario to stay at number 4 and somehow, some way, someone goes up and gets Anthony Richardson and they deem Will Levis can go in right away with Shane Steichen and have an offseason and he's going to be ready to go because Will Levis has been putting in just as much time as well this offseason, getting right and getting better and ready for this next year, then I'll sit here and be fine with it. I know a lot of people won't deem that. That's fine. I don't care. That's my opinion. That's how other people are. Like I said, I'm going to be stuck with whatever quarterback we get stuck with. And at the end of the day, I don't care. And, it's funny too, Cody, because now we have to look at what are the options for Indianapolis now that this is here. I mentioned the idea of Carolina wanting to potentially trade it. Now, those are just rumors. I don't know for a fact if that's actually true. Knowing, because again, it was funny to me, Cody, because people were talking about Frank Reich yesterday and as if Frank Reich was the one that made the trade. And I find that hilarious because it's just like, guys, Frank Reich did not make this trade. The GM of the Carolina Panthers made this trade. So, and just as to say, Frank Reich has his input on which quarterback he wants, But that isn't the ultimate deciding factor on the decision that is made by Carolina. If Frank Reich says any of these top 4 quarterbacks, I can come in, I can coach them, I know I can get it done, then that's fine. The GM will take that into consideration. At the end of the day, we just don't know. But I think, Cody, the ultimate move, the Colts need to trade up to number 3 with Arizona. I think it's a need at this point because, like you said, there are still 2, maybe 3 teams out there that are willing to trade up to number 3 to go and get one of these quarterbacks. You have to get your name in there now while you have a chance. And with the fact that you're number 4, it makes it much easier to do so. I think Andrew Moore and Zach Hicks both had the same exact trade option that I think would be perfect. You give them your 3rd this year and you give them a 2nd rounder next year. And you know what? Just as a matter of fact, Cody, I'm willing to throw in Kenny Moore to go along with it. If that's what they want to do. Jonathan Gannon coached Kenny Moore for a couple years here in Indianapolis when Kenny first got over here. He really likes Jonathan Gannon. It makes a lot of sense. You add to it, it's a piece that you just don't want to throw a lot of money into right now. You feel like if you don't give up your 2nd rounder this year, you can go and get another cornerback that can help fulfill that need. I mean, that's what I deem as a worthy trade. But whatever you got to do, man, go to number 3 because on the off chance, somehow, some way, Cody, that CJ Stroud falls or somehow that Carolina decides to go with Anthony Richardson or decides to go with a Will Levis at number 1, then that would be blowing the doors off of everything. Because then if Houston takes Bryce Young, which we know for a fact Houston wants to take Bryce Young. They haven't said it officially, but every report has said that they want Bryce Young if indeed he is available when their pick comes. So if somebody goes and gets Richardson or Levis early, Stroud could fall to you. But the only way you can guarantee that you have a choice in the matter, if something were to happen, is going and getting number 3. And it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to go and do that.
Yep, exactly. You just have to, like, I know, like, people will say, oh, I just don't want to give away any capital, but, like, are you willing to risk that a team's not going to trade up? Because I think a team will. If the Indianapolis Colts don't, a team will trade up. And, unless you are sold on any 4 of these quarterbacks, I really, Derek, could see a scenario where 4 quarterbacks go off the board if that happens. Like, I could really see a scenario.
100%.
I think that's likely, honestly, with how crazy things are.
Yeah.
So I just think it makes a lot of sense for Indianapolis. And with Arizona, I mean, it makes sense because Arizona's looking for basically everything but a quarterback. So they get the best defensive player out of it. So really, you're just flip-flopping for, some capital, obviously. But you throw in, you talk about Kenny Moore. They also just had their center. They just released their center, Rodney Hudson. So could Ryan Kelly be a piece that gets moved too? Like, Indianapolis has things that Arizona might want, some capital they might want in terms of players. So it does make a lot of sense from that standpoint. And I think it just make a lot of fans sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that, like, Indianapolis is going to get one of the 3 guys that we really like. Right. And so I would feel very good about that. And hopefully the Colts feel the same. And like you said, like, for other teams that are looking, it's going to cost them a little bit more. So, like, but also there is the chance, if you're in Arizona's shoes, that you lose out on a Jalen Carter, or you lose out on, whoever else, Will Anderson, whoever else you deem as a guy you want to get there at 4. So for Arizona, it makes a lot of sense because you're not losing that much, spot. Really, you're moving down 1, but really it doesn't hurt your value at all, and you're getting another draft pick out of it. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, again, Colts fans, you guys can tell me, I mean, whether or not you think that is the right move with, trading up and doing all these other things. So it'll be interesting nonetheless. Carolina opened some things up, and now we just have to see, Cody. I mean, we got about a month and a half until the draft. I don't expect that a team will be trading with Arizona within the next week or so. Because this was extremely early. You and I were talking about that right beforehand. I mean, it was extremely early. I mean, we heard people saying that this potentially could go into April with this kind of news. And we heard what Chicago reportedly wanted in a trade package, and clearly they weren't going to be able to get that, because if they that was what they got from Carolina, I mean, that was a haul, but that wasn't 3 firsts haul, which is pretty insane. But nevertheless, the Chicago Bears got a great trade in that. They're able to now do a lot of different things with that 9th pick, and they got a bunch of other players to add to this roster. I mean, that was what Chicago needed to do, and we'll see if Indianapolis deems it worthy of trading up to number 3, or who knows, even potentially somehow stealing number 1 from Carolina. I don't know. Maybe they deem it as an opportunity to give away a little less draft capital to go and get that guy. Who knows? Maybe, former team discount. I don't know. We can only hope, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's going to do it for this one, guys. Shake up in the NFL draft order now, but Colts still remain where they're at. We'll see if they decide to make a move now that the pressure is on. There are now at least 2 teams inside the top 3 that now need a quarterback. And will the Colts now have to potentially move up in fear of missing out? Let us know your thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.